Tyler Perry accuser Derek Dixon sits down in a TV interview for the first time, sharing allegations of workplace sexual assault and harassment. What made you decide to come forward with your story?
I wanted to speak out and not stay silent about it anymore.
There is an arrest warrant. That's where we have to start. Not a rumor whispered across gossip blogs, but a verified document now circulating within Georgia's law enforcement networks, naming Tyler Perry. The man once hailed as the savior of Black Hollywood, the billionaire who built a studio on a former Confederate base and turned it into a monument to independence, now finds himself at the center of a full-blown federal inquiry. We've confirmed that the FBI has been briefed on new witness statements, and insiders claim agents are preparing for a coordinated search of Perry's Atlanta compound. What began as a single civil lawsuit has turned into something far larger, an avalanche of allegations that no longer sound like isolated grievances, but a pattern of control and abuse reaching across his billion-dollar empire. The most disturbing part is the scale of the new voices. In the last 2 weeks alone, we've seen more than 30 individuals, actors, producers, assistants, camera operators, even private security contractors, step forward through attorneys or advocacy groups to provide sworn statements. Many describe similar experiences: blurred professional boundaries, emotional coercion, and a workplace atmosphere where silence was rewarded and resistance could end a career overnight. Several of these testimonies overlap with the timeline of Derek Dixon's original $260 million complaint, painting an image of an industry giant who used access and opportunity as currency. We've learned that at least half a dozen of the new accusers were still under NDA agreements signed through subsidiaries of Tyler Perry Studios. Legal experts say those contracts could now be voided if federal investigators confirm intimidation or retaliation.
Yes, we were over at his house. We're having some drinks in his guest house, and it was late at night, and he has a guest quarters, and said that you can sleep there instead of not driving. And his house is far from Atlanta and where I was living, and I got into bed, and then I noticed that he climbed into bed with me as well and started rubbing my leg. And I jumped up out of bed.
Perry's team has responded with sharp precision. In a filing submitted to Los Angeles Superior Court on October 1st, his attorneys dismissed Dixon's claims as false, cynical, and profoundly disappointing. They called the lawsuit an attempted shakedown and argued that the proper venue should be Georgia, not California. But since that filing, new documents have surfaced, screenshots of text exchanges, internal emails, and production call sheets that contradict key parts of the defense. Former production assistants have turned over data logs allegedly proving that Perry's private messages to employees extended far beyond work hours. 2 individuals who once worked as drivers have now provided affidavits stating that they were instructed never to drop certain visitors at the main gate after midnight, but rather through a private entrance known internally as Gate 7. None of this has been proven in court, but the growing overlap between testimony and evidence is impossible to ignore. We've watched Perry's camp push a unified narrative, that this is all part of a smear campaign coordinated by opportunists and rival producers. But behind that PR strategy, there's tension. One former studio executive who left quietly last summer is now cooperating with federal authorities. According to 2 sources familiar with those interviews, he described a command structure inside the Atlanta studio that revolved entirely around Perry's moods. Every script, every casting decision, even catering budgets reportedly required his sign-off. It wasn't just micromanagement, it was absolute rule. When staff questioned those systems, contracts were terminated and projects were shelved. There was no HR, one insider told us privately. There was only Tyler.
Were you looking for money to buy your silence?
No, I think I was looking for accountability on to what he did. I think what he did was wrong, and it needed to be something that would deter him from doing this to somebody else.
The deeper we look, the more this story becomes about power rather than personality. Perry's rise was built on the language of empowerment, faith, family, and self-reliance. But the same independence that made him a legend also insulated him from accountability. His studio operated outside union structures. Most workers were hired as independent contractors. That meant no union protections, no third-party arbitration, and no obligation to report complaints beyond his inner circle. For years, that autonomy was celebrated, but now it's being reframed as the perfect ecosystem for control. Lawyers representing multiple accusers have begun referring to Tyler Perry Studios not as a workplace, but as a self-contained world where career advancement and personal boundaries became indistinguishable.
For me, that was his way of showing his power over us and our careers, and that he doesn't have a problem with just one of us off.
The contradictions in Perry's public image are staggering. In 2021, he accepted the Jean Hirschholt Humanitarian Award for his philanthropic work. He has built homes for displaced families, funded scholarships, and even offered refuge to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle during their transition out of the royal household. But while he preached compassion from global stages, employees inside his compound describe a different kind of hierarchy. one where proximity to the boss determined safety and loyalty could outweigh ethics. Sources familiar with the ongoing lawsuits say several witnesses initially refused to testify out of fear that Perry's influence in Atlanta's entertainment economy would end their careers. One former crew member summed it up simply: "You don't cross the man who signs every paycheck in Georgia." Meanwhile, Perry's lawyers have continued to deny every accusation, reiterating that Dixon's complaint relies on fabricated accounts and distorted context. They claim that the messages cited in the lawsuit were platonic banter and that any physical contact described never happened. Yet when Dixon appeared in his first televised interview in June, he revealed that none of Perry's filings disputed the authenticity of those messages. His attorney noted, "They can't deny what's written in black and white." That line has since become a rallying cry across social media, especially as more former employees step forward with screenshots and call records of their own. The public is now watching a billionaire once celebrated for portraying morality on screen forced to defend his own off-screen behavior.
That's when he pushed me up against the wall and grabbed my again.
The backlash is widening beyond the lawsuits. When Alfonso Ribeiro, best known as Carlton Banks, publicly declared that he would never want that man to do anything for me, fans were stunned. The two had worked together on Meet the Browns more than a decade ago, and there had been no prior hint of animosity. Ribeiro's statement, though brief, triggered speculation that other high-profile actors might share similar grievances. Within days, online forums filled with old accounts of tense sets, rushed productions, and unspoken power dynamics. Perry's camp has not addressed Ribeiro's comment directly, but insiders tell us that the remark caused panic among his studio publicists, who fear that a chain reaction of disavowals could undermine upcoming partnerships with Netflix and Amazon. Adding to the chaos, a new documentary is reportedly in production, an unauthorized 3-part exposé titled Maxine's Monster: Surviving Tyler Perry. It's said to feature testimony from alleged victims and former staff. The title itself plays off Perry's own autobiographical film, Maxine's Child, released just months ago. Perry's attorneys are already threatening litigation to block the project, calling it defamatory. But entertainment lawyers say that if even one of the participants has filed formal complaints, legal action to stop the documentary could backfire by appearing as intimidation. Several media outlets have confirmed that filming began quietly in Los Angeles 2 months ago, with producers reaching out to at least 2 actors formerly under Perry's employment.
It got to a point in the night where, we were both kind of feeling drunk, and I remember we were walking back to the guest area where I've stayed before, and there was this health monitor scale on the way. And I was like, "What is that?" And he said, "Well, you have to be in your underwear to measure, whatever, so you should do it." He reached down and pulled my underwear down and grabbed my and I...
All of this paints a portrait of an empire under siege, not by rivals, but by its own foundation. Behind the glossy images of church-driven inspiration and self-made success lies a network of silenced employees, contested NDAs, and a legal storm that seems to widen each week. We can see how quickly admiration has turned into suspicion. The once unquestioned mogul who controlled every frame of his films now finds himself unable to control the narrative surrounding his own life. And yet, according to several insiders still close to him, Perry remains defiant. They say he continues to work from inside his compound, refusing to step back even as investigators gather evidence. Some claim he's been holding private meetings with security staff, ensuring that sensitive archives remain sealed until further notice. Others insist he's preparing to address the allegations directly in an upcoming televised interview, a risky move that could either reclaim his image or destroy it entirely. But as sources familiar with the FBI coordination have hinted, Atlanta may not even be where the most damaging material is located. There are whispers of a secondary property, off the official studio map, where production materials, personnel logs, and confidential correspondences were stored long before any lawsuit was filed. Investigators are said to be looking closely at that hidden location, and if what they find there aligns with the testimony already on record, the entire story could be on the verge of collapsing into something far darker than anyone expected.
Any of your initial interactions give you pause?
A few of them were, did give me pause, but they weren't bad enough to think like this was a dangerous situation in the beginning. Yeah.
The second property sits hidden behind coral-colored walls in imported palms, a 7-acre estate in the Bahamas registered under a shell company called Emerald Dune Holdings. We've traced the purchase back to late 2021, when Perry's main studio was expanding and his production slate with Netflix was at its peak. Officially, it was described as a creative retreat. But flight records tell another story. Between January 2022 and April 2024, Perry's private jet made at least 19 unlogged stops at NASA's smaller executive terminal, with passengers listed only as guests. Several of the new accusers now say that was the place where they were invited for what they believed were business meetings or spiritual getaways, only to encounter situations that made them uncomfortable, coercive, or manipulative. Local staff have begun talking too. A caretaker who once worked on the property told investigators that visitors rarely stayed more than a weekend and that security always collected phones at the door. Those statements match testimony from 2 former employees who claimed they were asked to sign fresh NDA forms in the Bahamas before entering what insiders called the safe house. Sources close to the FBI inquiry say agents are now reviewing financial transfers connected to Emerald Dune Holdings, including payments to private pilots and hospitality staff routed through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. It's no longer just about what happened in Atlanta. It's about how money and secrecy moved between borders. Behind the glamour of the island setting, we can see the beginnings of a financial pattern. Bank records subpoenaed from multiple institutions reportedly show a series of wire transfers totaling nearly $9 million between 2020 and 2023. Some of those payments were labeled as consulting fees, others as production bonuses. But prosecutors believe at least a portion may have gone to silence employees or buy back intellectual property rights that could have revealed deeper misconduct. One entertainment lawyer following the case described the transactions as a carefully built funnel of hush money under the guise of business expansion.
The day after that, he called several times and I ended up getting afraid of what was going on the other side. So I picked up. And that's when he said, he was sorry for what happened. He doesn't know why he did that and that maybe he was self-sabotaging or something. And in the same call, he said, and don't worry, we're going to do your show.
Perry's defense has pushed back hard, insisting the transfers reflect standard operating expenses for international film development. Yet investigators are skeptical, especially after discovering that some of the supposed consulting companies have no websites, no staff, and were incorporated only months before receiving funds. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division has joined the inquiry, tracking how these shell entities tie back to Perry's network of charitable organizations. That overlap could become crucial as prosecutors examine whether philanthropic donations were mixed with personal business accounts, a move that, if proven, would represent serious financial misconduct. Insiders at Perry's Atlanta headquarters describe panic meetings in recent weeks. Executives were allegedly instructed to audit every payment connected to creative contractors, particularly those who worked on The Oval and Ruthless. One source says files were physically removed from the studio's accounting office the same night the arrest warrant became public knowledge. Security footage from that evening, according to those familiar with the inquiry, has since gone missing. For a man who built his empire on the image of transparency and faith, the optics of vanishing records are disastrous. Meanwhile, the entertainment world is beginning to distance itself. Reports indicate that executives at BET have quietly paused negotiations for Perry's upcoming drama slate, while Netflix has shifted marketing dollars away from projects still bearing his name. Oprah Winfrey, once his closest ally and business partner, has reportedly ended formal collaborations. Their joint ventures, including several television specials, have been suspended indefinitely. Industry insiders say Oprah's team made the decision after internal risk assessments concluded the allegations were too serious to overlook. For the first time in his career, Perry's name is being treated as a liability rather than an asset.
These are claims that Tyler Perry denies, but Dixon says he's speaking out now to try to stop a billionaire who won't stop themselves.
What we're witnessing feels like a reverse coronation. The same industry that once crowned him as the face of independent Black storytelling is now dismantling his throne piece by piece. Talent agencies are quietly advising clients to decline future auditions for Perry's projects. Crew members are demanding union protections before setting foot on his sets again. Even longtime collaborators, people who owe their careers to his early support, are reevaluating their silence. One producer, speaking anonymously, said, "The stories we all ignored are finally catching up. None of us can pretend we didn't hear the whispers anymore. And those whispers keep growing." A leaked draft of the upcoming documentary, Maxine's Monster, Surviving Tyler Perry, reportedly includes interviews from 3 men and 1 woman who claim to have visited the Bahamas property. Producers say the accounts are backed by photos, travel records, and overlapping timelines. Perry's legal team has called the film a character assassination, but attempts to block it could prove futile now that international streaming distributors are bidding for rights. The project's title, echoing Perry's own Maxine's Child, feels almost symbolic, suggesting the mentor has become the villain of his own creation. At the same time, Perry's aggressive counterattacks are fueling the narrative rather than silencing it. In the past month, he's filed multiple defamation threats against bloggers, YouTube commentators, and even former assistants. Each legal move has sparked fresh headlines, reinforcing the impression of a man cornered by his own tactics. Former colleagues tell us that behind closed doors, he's been more isolated than ever, rarely leaving his office and communicating only through attorneys. Even his once loyal staff reportedly avoid eye contact in hallways, unsure which version of their boss they'll encounter, the calm strategist or the furious mogul demanding loyalty oaths. Financial analysts now say his empire's value has dropped significantly since the lawsuits began. Brand partnerships have stalled. Real estate investments in Atlanta and New Orleans are rumored to be under review by banks concerned about collateral exposure. One insider from the financial sector revealed that insurers have begun reassessing coverage on Perry's studio assets, which could trigger massive penalties if the investigation escalates to criminal charges. For a businessman whose reputation was built on control, the erosion of that control may be the most painful cut of all. We can't ignore the broader symbolism of what's happening. This isn't just about one celebrity's alleged misconduct. It's about the fragility of empires built on unchecked power. For years, Perry's story represented the ultimate triumph narrative, a man who rose from poverty to billionaire status by sheer will and faith. But the same fortress he built to protect his independence may now be the cage that traps him. Every revelation, every leaked document, chips away at the myth of moral certainty that once surrounded his brand.
Tell us about the first time you ever met Tyler Perry.
Yeah, I met him at his studio opening party in 2019. I was working for an events company, and we met, and he said to me, are you an actor? And I said, well, not right now. I'm working on it, but not right now. And he said, yeah, you are. We need to talk. You should get my number and we'll talk about this.
And still, the questions multiply. How far does the money trail go? Who else might have enabled the silence or profited from it? Some insiders hint that there are names far beyond Perry's inner circle. Executives, agents, even media figures, who could face scrutiny if investigators follow the paper trail to its end. The Bahamas property, they say, might be only one piece of a larger international web connecting entertainment money, charity funds, and personal indulgence. If even part of that turns out to be true, the fallout could reshape the power structure of Black Hollywood entirely. For now, the FBI investigation continues in near total secrecy, but whispers from Atlanta to Los Angeles suggest new subpoenas are coming. A second wave of accusers is said to be preparing statements, and legal observers believe a federal indictment could surface before the end of the year. Whatever happens next, the narrative has already shifted. The story of a self-made mogul who built his kingdom on faith, now facing the slow public dismantling of everything he created. And as we watch it unfold, we can't help but wonder, how many more stories remain untold? How many voices still stay silent, afraid, or waiting for the right moment to speak? Could this be the start of a reckoning that stretches far beyond Tyler Perry himself? Tell us what you think below, because this storm isn't over. It's only gathering strength. Until next time, stay curious, stay watching, and remember, in Hollywood, the truth never stays buried for long.